All right, let's get right into it. We're going to deconstruct a really fascinating lecture from back in 1990. Now, it's called The Spirit of Evangelism, but honestly, it's so much more than that. It's basically a masterclass in the psychology of how you share any belief you hold deeply. And it kicks off by asking a question that's, well, it's a little uncomfortable.
Right off the bat, this is how the speaker hooks his audience. And it's a great question, isn't it? Just think about it for a second. Why does that one little word feel so heavy, so awkward to drop into a normal conversation? His whole point is that if we can figure that out, it's the key to understanding everything else he's about to say.
So the first thing he does is tackle this feeling head-on in a section he literally calls the shame of speaking of God. He really wants to get to the bottom of why this happens in our modern world.
What he's saying is that it's nobody's fault in particular. It's more like we've all collectively, without ever saying it out loud, agreed to a kind of cultural rule. It's this unspoken pact that makes talking about where we ultimately come from feel weird, almost shameful.
Now, this is where he uses a really powerful analogy to make us feel what he's talking about. He asks us to imagine a child who doesn't know who their parents are, who makes no effort to find them, and who basically lives their life as if they just popped into existence all on their own. And then he puts that right next to how so many of us, he argues, treat our own creator. It completely reframes the issue. It's not an abstract debate anymore. It feels personal, almost like a family matter.
And he does not mince words when he draws his conclusion. Following that analogy to its logical end, he says that this kind of behavior, it's not just sad or pathetic, it's foolish. He's using that word on purpose, right? To kind of jolt you into really thinking about a mindset you might have just accepted as normal.
Okay, so that's the problem he's laying out, but his solution, this is where things get really interesting and kind of counterintuitive. He's about to argue that faith, far from being the opposite of reason, is actually a form of science.
To back this up, he asks everybody a really simple, direct question. Have you, yourself, ever been in a lab? Have you taken hydrogen and oxygen and personally proven that the formula for water is H2O?
I mean, for 99.9% of us, the answer is of course not. We accept that water is H2O as a fact because we trust the scientists who did the experiments. We put our belief, our faith, in their testimony and their results.
And here's where he draws this incredible parallel. He says, look, on one side, you accept a scientific fact, like water is H2O, based on an expert's verified experiment. So he asks, why isn't it just as logical to accept a spiritual fact based on the verified experience of a so-called spiritual explorer?
So you see what he's doing? He's completely redefining the word faith. For him, it's not some blind leap in the dark. Not at all. It's a rational choice. It's accepting a reported fact that has been verified by people who have actually gone out and had the direct experience.
Okay, so if that's the message, the what about the how? How do you actually go about sharing it? Well, this brings us to the person doing the sharing, the idea of being a pure messenger. The first thing he says is that your own internal state, your own motive, is absolutely crucial. The number one requirement is what he calls mushi, which means selflessness. Your reason for sharing can't be about you. It can't be to make yourself look good, or to get more followers, or to feed your own ego. The why is just as important as the what.
And he has this fantastic metaphor to explain what he means. Imagine the truth, or God's teaching, is this source of perfectly pure water. Now you, the messenger, you're the pipe that carries that water. And the message people actually get, well, that's the tap water that comes out the other end.
And here's the punchline. If that pipe, if you, are rusty or dirty or impure on the inside, the water gets contaminated. The message becomes muddy. And it doesn't matter how thirsty someone is for that truth, if it's delivered in a tainted way, they just can't drink it. In fact, it might even make them suspicious of the pure source the water came from in the first place.
All right, so you need to be pure in motive. But beyond that, the speaker brings up another virtue, one that I think you probably wouldn't expect when you think about spreading a message, and that is the sower's patience.
This is such a fascinating take because we always think of this kind of work as being all about fiery passion, right? But he flips that completely on its head. He argues that the single most important quality you can have is nintai, patience, the ability to endure and persevere even when you see no results.
To get this across, he uses the classic parable of the sower. Just picture it. You go out into a field and you've got 100 seeds you want to plant. You're giving it your all, sowing these seeds everywhere. Now, here's the tough part, the reality check. 99 of those seeds
99, they're going to fall on bad soil. They'll land on rocks, get eaten by birds, wash away in the water. From the outside, it looks like almost total failure.
But, and this is the whole reason you're doing it, 1, a single seed finds that one little patch of perfect, fertile ground where it can finally sprout and take root.
And here is the mind-bending twist. That one successful seed, he says, will produce a harvest so big it makes the entire effort worth it. And what about the other 99? They weren't failures, you get it? Their mission, their entire purpose was to be part of the process that allowed that one seed to find its home. That's what patience is. It's understanding that ratio and not giving up.
So how does all this fit together? You've got this rational faith, this need for a pure heart, this incredible patience. Well, the speaker brings it all home in this final, elegant framework he calls the Evangelist's 4 hearts.
So here they are, the 4 pillars. First, you have to have patience, that sower's mindset we just talked about. Second, you need love. That's the selfless motive, the pure pipe. Third, you need strength, the courage to stand tall against criticism and ridicule, which he says comes from that scientific belief in eternal life. And only then, only when you have those 3 firmly in place, does the 4th one show up, passion.
And this is the big warning he gives at the end. For him, passion is not the starting point. It's the result. It's the flame you see on the outside that can only burn because it's fueled by patience, love, and strength on the inside. He says that without that foundation, what we often call passion is fragile, and it's usually just our own ambition and ego dressed up in a pretty costume.
So after this whole deep dive into belief, motive, and method, he doesn't end with a command. He ends with a question he wants every person in the room to ask themselves, and it's the one we'll leave you with today. How do you see your own life? It's a question about your purpose, your perspective, and maybe the message that you're sending out into the world, whether you even realize you're sending one or not.